Now, hey everyone, and welcome to the Monsters of Men by Patrick Ness reading vlog? No, it's a reading vlog. Read-along live show. So, if we all quickly introduce ourselves and give us a quick thought of what you thought about this book, and then we can start talking about it in detail. So, Hannah, do you want to go first?
Yes, my name is Hannah. I gave it 5 stars, and my general reaction to this book is...
That's fair. Abby?
My name's Abby. I gave the book 4 stars. I gave all 3 books 4 stars, but I give the series 5 stars. Don't ask. And my reaction was... There was also a moment like Hannah's, but at the end was more annoyance, in a good way.
Fair enough. And I'm Becca, and I gave this 4 stars as well. So I don't think there's any point in talking about this in a spoiler-free section, so we just go straight into spoilers. Right.
Works for me.
Yeah, spoiler section. So, where do you want to start? Do you want to start with the return, or do you want to talk about anything else? Where do you want to start?
This is your live show. Where do you want to start? What thoughts do you have?
Well, can we start with the return, because that's the first one on my list?
Fair.
Because I made a list of questions. So
Where do you want to start? Because I have a list.
Yeah,
We'll follow your list.
Yeah. My first thought was, what do we think about finally getting the POV of the return, aka 1017?
I'm very glad that we actually got a POV of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because we hadn't had that before, so it was really nice to finally see their point of view and how they experience the world, which I thought was absolutely fascinating. Like,
Oh, sorry, go on.
No.
I was saying, compared to how the humans are reacting, experiencing the world, seeing how the Spackle experience the world and their like culture and everything else was absolutely fascinating.
I enjoyed seeing the view of the oppression from the oppressed rather than from the oppressor, who, although he didn't want to be doing it, as the Nazis found out in the Nuremberg trials, following orders does not give you a pardon. So I thought it was really interesting to see his take on someone who he can read the mind of and see doesn't want to be doing these things, but isn't mentally strong enough, for whatever reason, understandable or not, to actually withhold on doing them. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we talked last time about like the difference between like Nazi soldiers and like children soldiers like out in like African countries and things like that, and like how the parallels for Todd very much replicate both of them. And it's interesting. So I did the audiobook for all 3 books because there was no friggin' way I'd have finished these otherwise. I have been reading The Taking of Jake Livingston since January. That is only 200 pages, and I am barely 70 pages in. But when it comes to an audiobook, I'll devour it in an afternoon. So I was like, I'm going to have to do this as an audiobook. It's really interesting that they really lean into the kind of Afro-Caribbean accent for the Spackle in general, and kind of give them this like elevated indigenous culture vibe through the accent, and it makes it a lot more transparent what the point of that is. And I like the fact that we do have this kind of indigenous perspective, and how I was gonna swear them, how very angry the indigenous reaction is.
It's all good on this channel.
Do you know what it is? It's because I started, when I'm back at a school, I'm like, I shouldn't. So like, that was, yeah. And like just how angry they are and the way they refer to things. I also really, really liked from his perspective that you have 3 different languages, even within the Spackle, because you have the language of the burden, which is all the Spackle that were corralled and raised by the humans. The language of the land and sky, which is the kind of indigenous people that weren't forced into slavery. And then you have the language of the return, which is that cross between the two. You know, he understands some words of the sky and other words he's only got because of the burden. And the idea that he was essentially raised in captivity, and then kind of treated this way, he has very specific language, because that's how language works, right? So we get new words every time there is a horrific event, whether that is technology, war, etc. We get new language every time. And I really, as a literature major, I loved the idea that you have this massive group of people, that if they were unarmed combat, one-on-one, would have decimated the human race, have a variety of languages, because that's correct. Like, that just works. It creates an authenticity that I think is really valuable. And it shows them not just as an oppressed culture, right? Like, they're not just an us and them. They are fully fleshed out throughout the novel, specifically because they have all of these experiences, and you witness them through that. And seeing then the Return's journey, his character arc from being the trodden on to being the one doing the treading and becoming the Sky and kind of actively antagonizing as the Sky, and still fueling everything with revenge and rage and what happens versus the lessons the previous Sky has tried to teach him. Equally fascinating. My one gripe with it is that it meant that we had to have a Disney style redemption arc for Todd. And by that I mean Disney cannot redeem a character without killing them first.
Yeah, I can see that.
Like, they don't have any character. If they do bad things, it's either a minor bad thing that actually they can grow as a person. So like in Encanto, for example, the granny is a terrible person to her kids, but she's not so awful that she can't be forgiven. Like, it takes a hug and they're all good again, as opposed to Hans, who in theory actually did a lot for people, but because he's antagonistic towards the sisters, he's got to die. He gets thrown in the water. He's out of the story, done and dusted. Or Kylo Ren, who kills people, so has to die. I felt like the narrative around that, it felt like the Return was learning a story for himself, learning a truth for himself, that it was then really convenient for him to be too angry to action when the time came, so that Todd could then have his redemption in the form of dying, but not really.
I feel like it was also supposed to be kind of a shock value. Not in the negative way that sounds, but as in we see the Return kind of going through this arc inside of his own head. And so we see that he doesn't really want to kill him. He feels like he wants to, but he doesn't want to. He wants revenge, but it doesn't necessarily have to be death. And then having him turn up, you think it's just going to be, okay, they turn up and they have some sort of conflict, but you don't assume he's going to rock up on this beach and bam. So I feel like it was supposed to be like, war is never guaranteed to go the way you think it's going to go. That sort of thing where it's like, yeah, sure, the Return did want to kill him. He's dead now. With the whole death thing, I was really annoyed that we didn't get more after, not necessarily just of Todd, but more of how they settled afterwards. I know that there is a short story that could be read for free on the interwebs or is bound up into certain editions. And I read that and I was like, okay, this is very interesting. I like this short story. It does not give me more of this specific community that is now working together. I want that.
But at the same time, was that more so than the reader can make up their own mind as to how this is going to go next and have them think more about how they could...
I don't want to make up their mind. I'm reading. Tell me the story. I don't write this. Do I look like an author to you? No, I can't write. I read. Give me the story. Also, when you've got like the short story that is available is really cool. It kind of gives you more like depth in the Spackle and how the Spackle aren't all these like good people just defending themselves. Like, I like the short story, but if you're going to give me a short story after the ending that we have in the book, I need to see how things have went. I need to see who's stepped, because okay, like he would have been, you know, the one in power realistically. You need to see who's stepped into the power vacuum and how that actually plays out, because sure, Violet could, but this is also a group of people, not including the Spackle, who have been massively misogynistic. Are they really going to listen to a girl? Like, not even a woman, a girl. They barely listened to the woman. So like there's so much like who's stepping into the power vacuum, the Sky and who he kind of becomes, him like the new Sky, and who he becomes, and how he then changes how he interacts with people potentially, how then I forget what they call him, becomes dad, how his kind of intermediary thing then has an impact on how, like, I wanted that because there's so much complexity there and so much that could be written about, but could still have a lot of conflict. It doesn't all have to go wonderfully.
Yeah.
And that's why I was annoyed. It's because there's so much more there. And I would hope that's what Ness is going to write, and I know it isn't. But because he's meant to be writing another book in the series, but that's what
But I think that's the thing, is what you're asking for, essentially. Because, like, yeah, so my copy of this is like 600 pages.
roughly, yeah.
Yeah, 603 pages. At that point, like, this book was exhausting. Like, until about here, like, I was exhausted with it, to the point that I'm like, I'm reading it, and it is the same things over and over again, which is what war is, right? And I thought it was like a really good kind of show versus tell of like the kind of emotional trauma and the fact that it is constant. I think what you're asking for that is another 3 books in the series, and if that was going to be the case, they needed
was
to,
a
like,
short story.
well, I
Honestly,
don't.
the short story that we got, I think, is really good. Don't get me wrong. I want 2 short stories at the end because the one that's at the end is good. But I wanted another short. I don't, like Becca said, like, oh, for the reader to make up their own mind. I don't need everything written out for me. But we have no clue how this new Sky is interacting, how Tom's dad is like, how the things are interacting and working, who steps into the power vacuums. And that's what I wanted, is just like 15 to 50 pages of like exploring one minutia, one small issue, maybe like where people are living, how they try and start making amends for the atrocities committed against the Spackle. Just one bit that would be start. But like,
That's
one
the thing, is you've just sat there and listed like 30 different things that you've got questions about, which is completely fair, valid, and reasonable.
But I
want you to explain it in 15 pages. He did a year in 600 pages. Like, that's not, I don't think that would have. You think, like, for example, the last like series we read, right, Skullduggery Pleasant, each narrative is isolated, but each one is adding to the world building, right? If this had been lots of shorter 300-page books, yeah, absolutely, because then you've got your Grimoire, you've got your Armageddon Out of Here, where those narratives are already established in the world. My fear with that would be that we'd end up with like a Game of Thrones style final scene that feels really contrived, because yeah, how do you fill a vacuum like that? There absolutely would have been more politics. There absolutely would have been struggles for, you know, like Viola and Todd don't want to be in charge. There are people who want to be in charge. How would that work?
Even just like something after the point where it was, just a tiny thing to show that their world is still turning. Like, I don't need a lot. Like, literally, with Becca saying like, oh, you like the reader creates it in their own head. I'm fine with doing that for a lot, but I just need more than being left at that point. For me personally, like, when I saw that there was another short story at the end of the series, I assumed that was what it was before I went into it. I was like, oh, this makes sense. This is the sensible way to do this in my brain. And then I read it and I was like, well, that was interesting, but now I'm just angry. Because,
well, thing is that the other thing is obviously like it's going to change in 2 months anyway when the new colony arrives. Do you know what I mean? Like, they've established all this stuff, and then it's going to kick off again. I think there's stuff that like hints towards a more positive response, in the fact that in Todd's mum's diary, it's a lot more equal. What Violet is used to is a lot more equal. What the women, like the mistresses, remember is more equal, and that realistically that is a possibility. It's not certain, and yeah, to a certain degree it is down to kind of interpretation of the reader, which, yeah, by the sound of things, is not what you wanted. You want to have a clear-cut response.
Not even like, I just, as in just something for the way that this world is intending to, oh, lovely dogs, something that is for the way that this world intends to try and function. It could have been the arrival of the colony. It could have been, oh, the Sky, like, oh, the Sky is and that being all a mess and just being a really small snippet of it. Like, the chapters in this book were fairly short. It could have literally been 2 chapters, 3. 1 chapter would have satisfied me, but I understand how that would be very difficult for an author to do anything in. But like, even just 1 chapter with barely anything would have satisfied me. And it's just the fact that where it ended was so, from the way that obviously this is all personal opinion, but
no, this is practical professional advice, and Patrick Ness should take this as absolute criticism.
But for me, the way the story ended did not make me think any more than I already was doing, because I had been making the assumptions back in book 1 about how this was about colonialism and colonization and the erosion of Indigenous rights. I was making those assumptions from the first book. I don't need this to leave me thinking about, oh, how could I want to see something tangible, because I'd already made all of these assumptions that the author is trying to leave you thinking about in book 1, and it's book 3 now. I've had enough time thinking about these. We're also living through it. I would like you to just something more tangible than like, if that was the end of a TV series, I'd be like absolutely fuming.
Yeah, but if that was the end of the TV series, it's because they'd expect it to continue into another series. Like, when it comes to Hunger Games, for example, the first book was meant to be a standalone. And the reason we had a sequel is because Susanna Collins knew full well there is no way President Snow would let that fly. There had to be more story. And I think there is absolutely potential for at least 3 more books, a whole new trilogy looking at the dynamics of this world. Because I think there's so much going on.
Talks about, and the depth that could be gone into with everything, both prequels and sequels. There are almost an infinite number of books that could be written, but literally I just needed 50 pages. That's all separate. It's also because there was a short story.
Abby, that's what fan fiction's for.
I hate fan fiction.
No, you don't. You cannot sit there and tell me that you want 50 more pages and then tell me that you hate fan fiction, because all that is, Abby, is someone taking what you need and actioning it, which you've just said you're not prepared to do. So how can you hate fan fiction?
It's not by Ness, and so it's not canon, and so in my head, what's the point in reading it? It's not real to the story. I could read it and I'd be like, wonderful, this doesn't solve my issue because it's not.
Yeah, but stuff that happens in headcanon is, you could be reading the book and make a decision about that. We could decide that fundamentally the person who leads the humans is Ben, because he is the greatest translator between the two, right? That's complete headcanon. It's never decided. But Lee, Ben, and Wilf as a trio, strong counsel already, right?
Okay. But I'm never going to believe that as part of the actual story unless Ness either writes it or posts somewhere online, yeah, this fan fiction that someone's written, this is how I'm going to say it goes down. Other than that, no. So that's why I don't bother with fan fiction, because to me, I understand why people love it. I completely understand why people love it. But for me, if it's not the official publication of whatever it is, then it's just redundant extra story and I have enough stuff to read.
Okay, so what about all the spin-off stories from Terry Pratchett that weren't written by Terry Pratchett but are part of Discworld?
I haven't read any of them.
Okay, but do they count? Because they're still part of Discworld.
Not as part of Discworld.
Not fan fiction, published traditionally.
To me, they're not part of Discworld unless Terry Pratchett approved them. So were they published after his death? Has he officially said that they count? If he said that they count, then it's part of it. He's read it and he said, yes, this is part of Discworld, so it counts. If it was after his death, tough shit.
What about the Tiffany Aching book written by his daughter?
That one, Chris has already biased me. Chris is my partner. Has already biased me against Rhiannon. He does not like her for what she's doing to the Pratchett estate, which is essentially at this point just heavily monetizing it. So I am unsure about that one because it's in a very grey area. So that's one that I would have difficulty with. But yeah, anything that's been written by anyone else. Actually, to be honest, yeah, I'd probably read it, but it wouldn't go into the Discworld in my head. It would be its own separate little entity of something that she decided would go in the Discworld, but he didn't approve it, so no, it doesn't count. So that's why I don't bother reading fan fiction, because to me, with all the other stuff I have to read, and that I want to read already, with 200 books, it's a waste of time reading something that I won't count as real in the fictional world.
Interesting. I'm coming from this as a person who spent her entire teenage years reading fanfic, and has about 110 pages.
I see why
on
other people love it. I'm just saying why it doesn't work
kills
for
me
me.
because, like, yeah, Olivia works in publishing and will like read books,
We'll devour fan
and then
fiction
we'll
as well.
read fan fiction for pleasure. And I think, yeah, and like it's interesting. I think it's also interesting because the bit I'm challenging is the idea that you hate fan fiction, because I'm like fair enough if it's not for you, but I just
right.
find that
I said that I hate fan
think,
fiction. That was clearly an exaggeration just for comedic effect.
is
Like,
it?
I'm not.
I've taken everything you said as gospel, Abby.
Okay.
Shall we move on? Abby? Where did Abby go?
I think Abby's left.
Shall we carry on?
Sure.
I was going to say as well, what did we think about Ben's return and his connection to the Spackle? You know, and
I really liked it. I really liked that kind of dynamic between the two.
Because I was not seeing the plot twist that Ben was going to turn out to be alive. I was not seeing that whatsoever. So I was like, what do you mean Ben's actually alive and the Spackle have him as well? You know? And that constant idea of what was going to happen with the return, and if he was actually going to kill Ben, because there was a minute where he was like, I could get the revenge on Todd by killing Ben and everything else. So that was such a interesting storyline. I was like, where the hell is this going to go? I was constantly like, where is this going to end? You know, and how?
I think the other thing is he's such a perfect foil for the president as well. Like the fact that he is almost the natural father to Todd. And I was expecting a plot twist for the president to be like, I am your father kind of moment. But it just feels like that he had to come back because he was the only one that could match him toe to toe. But did I see that coming? Absolutely not.
No. I think it was also a good thing to have that kind of in-between moment where Ben is that intermediary. Is that the word I'm looking for?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like between the two as well. So then you've got that person who is right in the middle there, who can sort of explain both sides, you know, and knows things from both sides as well. So I really like that was where Ben's storyline went, and that scene where he actually reunites with Todd was such a good scene. I really love that scene where Ben actually was revealed to Todd to still be there, and I really love that, because also to touch on Todd's storyline as well, with him being controlled by the mayor and being very much treated like a son in a lot of ways, to then see what the impact of a real father's love and a positive father's love on Todd was absolutely night and day, and how it broke him out of the conditioning, I guess you could call it, of the mayor was so good. You know, I really, really love that.
Yeah. No, I
that
completely agree.
Such a good moment. I really, really love that one, because thinking about it as well, what did you think of Todd's whole storyline with him actually being controlled by the mayor?
I think it was interesting. It kind of irritated me a little bit because that's what we'd had in book 2. We'd already had him being controlled by the mayor. And I think the idea that he was like, oh, I need to keep the president alive for these reasons was a facet of the narrative that just kept the story going. It was that I found exhausting. Like, if they were working around trying to work with him and he was seen as a spy or kind of caught between the two, that would have been less exhausting. Looking at him just slowly become a new Davy was exhausting. And it's not that I didn't mind it narrative wise. I didn't mind it narrative wise, but absolutely that was not how I wanted to spend my time.
I mean, yeah, because that was quite sinister, seeing him slowly become more and more sort of with the mayor and things like this, and him not being able to do anything and kind of sleepwalking into it was actually kind of scary in a way, you know, because I mean, obviously we kind of have brainwashing, but it's kind of seeing that happen in such real time and seeing him go blank in his head and seeing Viola's point of view going, I can't read him, was genuinely like, oh dear God, what the hell is going to happen if she can't read him? And then she's starting to distrust him because of that. I found that so interesting to read, especially from like Viola's point of view, and seeing how she was viewing Todd so differently because of that was so interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And seeing like how she handles, because like it should be normal for her not to be able to like read people's minds and hear their noise. How jarring she found that, considering that's all she'd known of him, was really interesting.
Yeah, because also seeing how oh God, what was his name? The guy who was part of the scout ship,
Bradley,
and seeing him react to suddenly being able to hear everybody else's thoughts and everybody being able to hear his thoughts. I was so glad we got that, because obviously we've only ever seen it from Viola's point of view and all of her thoughts were protected. So seeing it from a man's point of view was quite interesting.
Well, it's a first person and present tense version of it, whereas what we'd seen prior to that was through Todd, who'd only ever known that. He'd only ever, like, he'd seen noise be repressed, he'd seen it grow, he'd seen the roar of it. To experience it for the first time and having to like manage your thoughts, like the way Bradley was like thinking about Simone and how uncomfortable that made her, because it forced her to confront the fact that she was not interested in him in the same way, was rough, right? And it's incredibly rough. To find yourself in that incredibly vulnerable situation. I loved that we had a first person perspective of that. I also, him kind of connecting it through information. I really like that through this book, we see a transformation between it being the noise is a bad thing, it's a curse, it's a problem, to no, it's connection. And it's information, but we don't have to be driven mad by hearing it constantly. The idea that Ben and the president were in that same spot, learning through the same way and not experiencing it the same way. Like the president let himself, because his focus was on power and control as opposed to connection. He couldn't connect to anyone. He was so morally superior, classic narcissist vibes. Do you know what I mean? Like it was just not being able to buy through that.
Yeah. So I think as well, it was really interesting to see him, see how everybody else reacted to Bradley as well, with how they were calling him like the humanitarian, like that was a bad thing, while everybody's warring and everything else, and how seeing it from his outsider's point of view and seeing how him and Simone react so differently to this and what they should do and everything else, and seeing how they, like everyone else around them, was acting like him saying, no, we should talk this out, we can get peace and everything else through like talking and everything else, and seeing how everyone else was like, no, we've got to fight this and everything else, was so interesting. I keep on saying the word interesting, I apologize.
Because it is, like, it's an interesting book and it's full of those things. Like, don't feel like you have to synonymize it. Like, I think you're right, it is completely interesting.
It's just the fact that I used the word interesting about 30 times in one vlog, so now it's just every single time I say it, I'm like, I need to find a different word.
Look, I say it's a good time regardless of the book, so...
Yeah, fair enough. We all have our phrases that we keep on using over and over and over again, but see Bradley kind of being the humanitarian compared as well to Simone, who's going, no, we need to like go to war and everything else. I think this has just come to me, but seeing it like in the traditional stereotype would have been Bradley going, no, let's go to war, and Simone saying, let's talk it out. Seeing it the other way round as well was a really fascinating way of doing it, because obviously if you go by the stereotypes of men and women, it would have been Bradley who would have been trigger happy and Simone going, no, let's talk this out. So to see it the other way round as well was a really like cool character choice that Patrick Ness made there to like flip it on its head. So I really wanted, that's just come to my head, so I just wanted to point that one out as well. I think I'm rambling.
No, not at all.
Sometimes I ramble because sometimes it gets into my head and I just have to kind of say it, and it's not a fully formed thought, but that's where that thought went. I think I got to the end.
I think we got there.
We got there. Right. I was trying to see what else was I going to say about all of this, because I had so many things. Yeah, because also I was going to say I think it was so important as well with Viola and Viola's point of view, because she was using the word indigenous for the spackle, and she also used the genocide word, which is exactly what that was. And the fact that she used that is so like hard hitting and important to use, because everybody else was going, no, it's just a war and things like this, and they were really like dehumanizing the spackle. Obviously they aren't human, but they were acting like
which we're seeing in real time happen at the moment, right? Like the difference between being like we're at war versus it's a genocide. Like fundamentally the spackle, like, you know, there's a moment where Coyle says, you know, the enemy have not been lazy, and it's like, why should they? Why should they have sat back and just taken that? Like, that's unacceptable. The fact that any spackle found were either killed or subjugated is insane, in the same way that if it were happen in real life, and does happen in real life, is insane. And I think it is really important that we see that language used, because I think those words are becoming taboo in the general public, because it makes us uncomfortable. This book is designed to make you uncomfortable. It is about an uncomfortable topic. And I think it should.
Yeah. And once again, this book is so like ahead of its time, because this was written in what, like 2012, I think it was.
Yeah.
And to already be using that language and saying this is wrong and these are the words we should be using because these are the right words to describe the situation, and not hiding away from it or acting like it's, like using, I should say, like nicer words, I guess you could put it, or like words that don't describe that situation accurately. I really like that he did actually use those words and put a name to it.
Yeah.
You know, it didn't just kind of go, oh no, it is just a war or whatever else. He used the word genocide and he used the word indigenous, which was exactly what he needed to do. And I'm so glad he did not shy away from that.
Yeah, I agree.
So I was also, that's what I was going to say as well, that the mayor, like the mayor's actions throughout here as well, the way he was viewing this like it was almost a game or like make believe the whole way through, like him,
because he's assuming victory, right? Like it's the idea that for him it is him and Coyle are just trying to one up each other. And whilst their intentions and motives are different, their actions are the same. And actually, if their motives were the same, they would be a force to be reckoned with, because they are the only two really that ever stood up to each other. And well, it is, because he's got his puppets, he's got his little men, his little toy soldiers, these men that will go off and do what he tells them. And even if they won't do it willingly, he's got the capacity to control them, to make them vicious and make them do it. He is a kid, and it's why he throws such a temper tantrum when it doesn't go his way, because that's what happens when a spoilt brat loses their favorite toy, you know, like, and it is so petulant. And that is so terrifying, because that is so very true to the male condition.
Yeah. So actually, I was going to say the use of toy soldiers there is definitely the way I would have put it, because I was saying it was more like a role play for him. Like they were role playing, like they were kids playing like cowboys at school or whatever. In his head, nothing else mattered. It was just a game in his head. Like he knew that they were going to war, but he didn't care about anybody else. He just cared about winning. He didn't care about the collateral damage. He didn't care about who was going to die. He just thought he was going to win, and that was all that mattered to him.
Yeah.
And that was absolutely fascinating to read and to see as well, because Coyle was acting like this was war and that people were going to die, but she didn't care. Whereas I think the mayor knew people were going to die, but he didn't care because he didn't believe anybody else was kind of human. Do you get what I mean? Sort of like he was only viewing himself as like human, whereas everybody else was not human, but like they just didn't matter, and they were more like playthings. Whereas Coyle was like, yeah, they're human, but it's all part of war. It's a casualty of war. It doesn't matter. Whereas he was like, no, they're just toy soldiers. It's fine, you know. And the juxtaposition between the two was also very interesting on that one.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, is it's the idea of like the casualties of war is such a wild phrase, right? Like the idea that there's this collateral damage, this thing that we know is going to happen, and we do it anyway. And it's like, it's interesting because you think like 400 years ago, before barbed wire, before tanks, before machine guns, that wasn't a thing. You would find a field in the middle of nowhere, your soldiers and their soldiers would rock up. It wouldn't impact the surrounding areas the same way. It would obviously still have impact because you would like corral and harass men into being in your army in the first place, but it was never destructive on like an international scale, whereas now it is. Like you see like India invading Pakistan recently, right, or like 2 days ago, over one patch of land, the Kashmiri area. And the idea that this is a war that, again, has been going on for generations, only really getting screen time because we're getting sick of seeing Ukraine and Russia and the Palestinians and Israelis, you know, but conflict takes up 80% of the planet at the moment. That's insane.
Yeah,
and to see it kind of in book form and see, you know, because they talk about like, oh, we could go to the other side of the world, and it's like, but they'd find us, they'd come here, they'd do the same thing. There's no middle ground, there's no safe space, and this book does not allow you the respite where others do. Like you think, like for example, Hunger Games, you have chapters upon chapters where they're in a bunker and nothing happens and they're just processing through their trauma. This book does not give you that grace. It is not gentle with what happens. It is relentless because war is relentless. They are exhausted. I'm exhausted reading it because that's what war is fascinating.
And to see how he really didn't, like Patrick Ness really did not sort of hold back in the descriptions of the destruction right at the beginning, like when the Spackle are literally firing on them with that boomerang thing, and to see how that like played out, and seeing Todd's point of view as everybody is dying around him, I really liked in a way that he didn't sort of hold back on that or anything else, and he didn't just go, oh, hundreds of people died. He actually described it, and you see it in horrific detail. I really like that literally did not like, wasn't sort of played down or anything else.
Wasn't glossed over at all. No.
Because what I was going to say as well was with Coil and Coil's suicide. What did you think about that one?
That annoyed me. Like, that annoyed me because I feel like actually she would have been an asset, but it is so very in keeping with her character. Go out in a blaze of glory. It sucked that she took out Simone with her. Yeah,
because I did like Simone in a way, even though she was sort of more on Coil's side of things. I did quite like her.
But what a clever little bean to turn off the warheads.
Yeah. But I mean, Coil sacrificing herself as well was like, I wasn't sure on that, I will say. And then seeing Todd, seeing this was happening and saving the mayor instead. Obviously that was like his mind control in there, but to see how he saved him instead of Simone was very impactful. You know, very, very impactful to say the least.
It really shows that like those times when he's saved the president, it's almost like that's something the president has implanted in him. If he thinks he's got control, the one thing that the president has forced him to do is to protect him at all costs.
Yeah, because that's all that matters in the mayor's head.
Yeah.
It's that he's in control, he's still alive, it doesn't matter what else happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it makes me wonder what would have happened if Coil had taken out the mayor at that time and both of them had been off the board. What would have happened then?
Probably the end. It probably would have been the Spackle had rolled in and Ben would step forward as the source, because that's what was coming next, right? The source was on its way. Yeah. I think the book would have been 200 pages shorter. Yeah,
probably. But at the same time, how realistic would that have been if she had taken out both?
Very clean, very unlikely.
Yeah. And I think it would have done the book a disservice in a way. and the story to be
It
disservice.
did, yeah. It wouldn't have given Todd the opportunity to realize what's being done with him and attempt to fight it off.
Yeah,
because that's his redemption, isn't it? But does it come 600 pages too late? In my opinion, yes. Like, don't get me wrong, I still loved it. I still gave it 5 stars. It made me cry, so it automatically gets 5 stars. I think there's loads of things we can pick at, but fundamentally, the reason it's such a messy, complicated story that doesn't feel complete, that doesn't feel like it has everything it needs, is because that is probably the most authentic thing about it. Like, it isn't about the good guys winning. The good guys rarely win. They struggle through, they do their best, but they are fighting one thing after another. And yeah, fundamentally, it boils down to one person, and it makes a massive difference when they're gone. But the damage that he has done is irreparable.
Yeah, because the way the mayor controlled everybody as well, because you've got to think as well, he was controlling so many people. Now they don't have that. What is going to be the fallout when they realise that all of them have been controlled by him in the first place?
Yeah.
You know, and like how he was. Because do you think he ever would have made it so he was controlling the entire planet?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Do you think he would have been able to control the spackle as well? No, I think the spackle, like, I definitely think he could have controlled all of the humans. I think the spackle, it just wouldn't have worked with them because them, like, their way of communicating is not really different because it's still that mind reading thing. But I think they would have had that protection against it because they are so connected in a way.
Yeah.
So they would have had maybe the sky to fight back against him in that sense to stop him from taking over the spackle. But then he would have had control of every human on the planet. And then would the spackle have had any chance of defeating him in that way and the rest of humanity when they're willingly going like lambs to the slaughter because he's controlling them? And it also speaks to the level of power he has if he's managing to override the human sense of like self-preservation.
Yeah,
that isn't easy.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Also, I was going to say, what did you think of the mayor's ending itself?
I don't know how I feel about it. I didn't like the idea that it's just this big fish that comes out of nowhere and eats him, right? I kind of wanted to see him physically fall. I kind of like the idea of him like falling off a cliff into it. So
I
that
think it happened too fast.
Yeah.
It was sort of like he's walking backwards, gone.
Yeah.
And I kind of wanted not a prolonged death, but I think that wasn't the ending he deserved. He deserved a more difficult.
He either needed a very mundane, boring death, or it needed to feel like a punishment. Yeah. And what we got was somewhere in between, where it was mundane for the world. He got eaten, but actually there was no catharsis there.
Yeah. I also think as well, because there's going to be no body, how is everyone else going to react? Are they going to believe that he's gone? Yeah. Or are they going to be constantly looking over their shoulder like, is he going to come back? Is he going to control us all again? Because a man like that wouldn't just leave. He would leave, come up with a new plan, and come back again. So I think in a way, it would have been better if his body had been there. Because obviously they can read it in Todd's mind what happened and see what he saw. But at the same time, is that... like, because obviously Todd and everybody else can come up with lies, they can imagine different things, and obviously they could then not believe him, and then it all could go wrong in that sense.
I think the punishment he deserved was akin to a lobotomy, where he continues to live, but without the brain power that he has had this entire time.
Yeah. But then again, lobotomy has been used so often in the past as like punishment for like people who did not deserve it. That could sort of.
But then I think that's why it would work for me specifically, is I think it's an opportunity to oppress the oppressor. And I feel like I think the return should have been the one to do it. And I think it should have been something that the land did, whether it's that they lock him in a tree and make him part of something where he doesn't have thoughts or mind, or whether it's they flood him with everything they know and that causes his brain to dribble out through his ears. Like, whatever it is, I think I wanted them to be in control of that, and not for revenge, but for justice, and then to bring in the conversation about the two.
He definitely deserved some kind of punishment, because what he got was he kind of got away in a little way scot-free. Like, yes, he did lose that son figure in Todd, and that was probably heartbreaking enough with how much he was like clinging on to him. But at the same time, it felt like he did need a little bit more of a more extensive punishment.
Yeah.
You know, like, obviously they couldn't imprison him because he'd just get out. You know, he'd just mind control someone and get out. But if he could be, like, I don't know. I don't really know, to be honest. Because you can't imprison him. But maybe, like you said, becoming maybe like a tree or something where he's part of the land. Like, the physical land. Not the people of the land, but the physical land. But he can't do any harm. You know, or just to see the body. It's like, I genuinely feel like they needed to see the body. You know, because he's terrorized this planet for 20 years. And I think humanity and the Spackle needed to see that. Say, look, it is over. He is gone. You know, who is left are not the, like, more sort of, how do I describe this? The sort of, honestly, I've had a whole bunch of...
Like, what is this? I've got nothing. I cannot help you. I've no idea where this is going.
Sorry, I've had a ton of B12. My brain should work now. I still can't come up with words. But, like, the more sort of, not sensible people, but do you know what I mean? So they can turn to the Spackle and be like, look, the worst of us is dead. He's not controlling us anymore. We want to go down a different path.
Yeah, here's the rational response to go along with our emotional response.
Yeah. I think that would have been maybe a better ending for him, because also I think that fish ate him far too quickly.
And also the fish have not really been there. Like, it was, if you're going to have like a Chekhov's gun moment, it was like barely a chapter long. Yeah. We see fish at the start, they eat him at the end.
Yeah. Because also I think with that as well, the way he was kind of trying to push Todd and be like, oh yeah, if you push me, you're going to become like me. You could turn out like Ben if you just leave me alone, kind of thing. While he's stepping into the ocean, it was a little bit like, no, someone should push him. Yeah. Maybe not Todd, but someone. Yeah. Maybe should have pushed him.
I would have loved if suddenly Todd was also telekinetic as well as telepathic. That would have been fun. And he just starts like magnetoing him across the room.
Oh yeah, definitely. Very sort of, to make a reference to the latest Marvel movie, very Sentry. So fun. But anyway, so I definitely think the Mayor's ending could have gone a little bit differently. In some way, shape or form, it could have been a little bit different.
Yeah.
Somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad he's dead. I'm glad he didn't carry on living, because that would have...
I still think he should have died at the end of book 2.
Yeah, but then how would it have all gone from there, though?
Well, that's when you have got Coil as an antagonist versus Ivan or something like that. Like Abby said about like the power vacuum, seeing it earlier doors, I think would have been interesting. I do think it should have been a whole nother book.
Yeah. But at the same time, I don't think the series would have been the same without him pushing things forward. You know, and I think in some ways, him dying at the end of book 2 would have done the series a bit disservice in a way as well.
But you've got Tate and you've got a couple of others that actually could have like stepped up to his mantle, or even Todd to a certain degree, thinking he's doing right, but actually slowly becoming the thing that he thought he'd destroyed.
But then the book would have been even longer with Todd then unlearning all of that, because he has unlearned.
But he had to unlearn it in this one anyway. I mean, it's still 600 pages long. I don't know if it would have been any longer.
Yeah, but then also Todd going backwards in that sense, because he's already unlearned so much from Prentice Town. For them to him to become a like mayor type person, would that have just been undoing a whole load of character development he's gone through to then make him basically.
I don't know if it made that much of a difference because he still pushed James around. He still used his mind magic to destroy James. He still did a whole bunch of other things. I'm not convinced that he couldn't have had that arc without, because there's so many times when people were like, "You're just like him," and he's like, "No, I'm not." That I feel like that could have carried the narrative. I feel like that could have worked, but that is my opinion.
Maybe that's what book 4 is going to be about. He's turned into a mayor type character,
Maybe.
and Viola's gone, what the hell has gone on?
I don't think he can turn into a mayor type character now that he has been so intrinsically part of the Spackle. Like in the same way that, and he's got Ben back. I think that, because that would have been really interesting if he had gone down the route of like being like the mayor and then trying to justify that to Ben would have been interesting.
Because I think as well, I don't think even Ben would have been able to not justify it, but to sort of see Todd like that.
Yeah.
I don't know how Ben would have reacted, because obviously Ben has not seen the things Todd has done. He knows what Todd has done, but he wasn't there to witness it. So I think if he'd been around seeing him doing what he was doing to the Spackle and numbering them,
yeah,
I do wonder how Ben would have treated him afterwards.
Yeah.
You know, that would have been very interesting. I think Patrick Ness needs to do a whole what if series, saying what if this happened instead, and then doing a bit of a tangent on it.
Yeah. Or like I said, let's have a look at some of them fan fictions.
What were the other things I was going to say? That's it as well. The mayor was confirmed to have been putting poison on the band. What the hell was his plan after that? Because if he's poisoned all of the women are all dead.
Yeah, but he wants it to end. Like, it showed at the end just how suicidal he was. He was excited about Todd because Todd was the last boy. When everyone's grown up and when everyone's in his control, that's it. That's what he's excited for. So at that point, and he's got full control and all women are dead, it's silent. That's what he's looking forward to.
I mean, then he's just got Prentice Town 2.0 though. But then the thing is that he knows that the next ship is coming, and that's going to have like 5,000 more people on it. So what's he going to do then? Because he's got an army of men.
He's gonna spin his story, but then he didn't know until he confronted Viola that was the case. And actually, I think he had the cure. He would have found a few women who were willing to do what they were told in exchange for the cure.
Yeah, and it would have turned into Handmaid's Tale real quick.
Big time. Yeah.
Like, he would have loved that, having just a Handmaid's Tale type thing.
Yeah.
And
you can have my children and then I will control them as well.
Yeah. And I will turn this into a utopia where, for me and me alone, and everybody worships the ground I walk on, because they're either brainwashed by me or I'm going to kill them.
Yeah.
Is essentially where that's where his thought process was going, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But it also just felt slightly short-sighted in my head. I don't know if it's just my not entirely, but mostly logical brain going, but you've just killed all of the women. What is the point in that? You know, like, if you've killed all of the women, you are then at a dead end again. You know, you're back at Prentice Town.
Yeah, exactly.
And then it's like, if that had happened and he had succeeded, then would have it like gone back to the beginning of the narrative, and we would have ended up in another sort of cycle of like everybody trying to unlearn what he's done and everything else once the ships arrive.
Yeah.
Again, it's another what if situation.
I love a what if.
I love a what if. It's one of my favourite comic series. Genuinely, it's absolutely incredible. But
if it takes something that you're interested in and it just messes around with it a little bit, I've got no problem with that.
I mean, I do love looking at all the different possibilities and all the rest of it and exploring different stuff. I know people hate the TV show. I personally loved it. But
I never watched it, but I will feel like I should give it a go, you know?
Captain Carter's a badass. Seeing Peggy but seeing Peggy flip a truck with her shield as Captain America, my God, I nearly died at that moment. It was unbelievable. Okay. Incredible. Just definitely check it out. And there's a whole load of other bits in there as well that are so good. There's so many good stories. There are some random ones, like what if Darcy and Howard the Duck ended up having a kid, which is weird as hell, but that was the point. It was fun. You know, people don't like fun anymore, as I keep on putting it.
Fair.
They don't. I just say these things. What else was on my list? Todd and Viola. Speaking of couples, Todd and Viola finally got together.
I think it's really interesting because one of the things that we all said about book one was that we liked that it was platonic, and we were like, yeah. And then actually, when she started dating or like flirting with Lee, I was like, okay. And I feel like I was not sold on their romance, but I will say that it reminded me a lot of Philip Pullman's Northern Lights trilogy with the two soulmates. And I think fundamentally, because of the sheer amount of trauma they both go through, they are very much soulmates. Do I believe they're a romantic couple? No. Can I see them as adults doing anything couples do? No. But hey, asexual and aromantic couples are a thing, and I'd be here for that. Again, I would want to see it in fan fiction.
Yeah, I mean, I never shipped them romantically, you know. I was thinking very much platonic friendship. I don't know.
There's a door open. 1 second.
I don't know if I could see them not lasting as a couple. I could definitely see them lasting as a couple, if not just because they've trauma bonded in a way. You know, they've been through so many things together that no one else will really ever understand that. So I can see them being a couple in that sense, but I don't know if it's romantic. For me personally, I don't think it's romantic. I think it's more along the lines of they've just gone through so much together that they've bonded with each other, and there's no kind of like, it's not escape from that, but there's no one else who will understand.
No one else will ever understand them. Yeah, there's no camaraderie like their camaraderie, and that just is what it is. Yeah, but I agree.
Whether or not they could ever have another romantic bond with anybody else as well, I don't know. Because to me, both of them read as very asexual and aromantic. And I don't know if that's just because, I mean, to me, Katniss also in the Hunger Games definitely reads to me as aromantic and asexual. You know, she reads very much not interested in any of it. She's just with Peter because she does love him, but she loves him slightly more than a friend, but it's not quite that full romance in my head. I don't know if that's just me viewing that as an asexual person.
I get it. It's why I found it weird they have a baby. Like,
yeah, I was kind of like, I don't know if I would have ever gone that far with those characters. You know, and to be fair, I'm quite glad that Todd and Viola, we didn't skip forward and they've had kids or anything else, because I think that would have done a disservice to this story, especially with everything it was exploring around with sexism and patriarchy and things like this. I'm glad we didn't end up with that very heteronormative, this is how their story is going to end or how it's going to evolve. So I'm kind of glad we didn't go down that route. And we didn't see that with those two. I think it works in a way for Katniss and Peter, because obviously they feel safe enough to have children now because they're not going to deal with the Hunger Games or anything else. So they're not going to go through that. And as Katniss says, there are far worse games to play right at the end. But with Todd and Viola, I think where they're left as kind of together but not quite romantic works for them as characters. You know, where they are more than friends, but they're not quite fully romantic in a way. And I don't think they ever will be romantic in that sense with each other or with anybody else, to be honest. You know, again, I'm just word vomiting, so apologies for the word vomit. Yeah,
for it.
But that's where my brain is at the moment with those two as a couple. You know, I like where they were, and I think that was the perfect place to put them.
Yeah. But also they're teenagers as well. Like, they're still like barely 14, 15. So I think it makes sense not to sexualize them anyway. Like, even as a couple, like, I think that's makes sense to me.
Yeah. Even though like people like Lee were thinking a little bit more along those lines.
Oh, but that's the difference is, right? The difference is like, you can have teenagers within a narrative thinking that about each other, because that's what teenagers do. I think as a reader, if you're sexualizing characters that aren't designed to be sexualized, that's a problem. And I think it makes sense for like characters. It's like any kind of teen thing where they think about kissing or doing other things or thinking about them in like a naked way or whatever. That's human nature, because that is, you know, reproduction doing its job, right? And it doesn't even have to be in like a sexualized, sexy way. It can just be like, oh, I've just thought about that thing and that's really uncomfortable, right? And I think, but then as a reader, don't get me wrong, I love shipping characters, but I get really funny about shipping teenage characters.
Yeah.
I think college and higher, I'm better with it because it feels, maybe it's just the teacher in me. I just don't like doing it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't mind shipping teenage characters if they're already together, like in the narrative. Like, that's fine to me. Just don't go anywhere near talking about them in that kind of sexualized manner, because that feels really icky and kind of like definitely not. Like with older characters who are like, say, 20 and above, because anything younger than that also makes me feel a bit gross, you know, but anything older than that, go ahead. But with teenagers, I definitely think shipping should just be stuck maybe just to the romantic side if you're an adult at the very least.
Mm-hmm.
You know, definitely.
Yeah.
So I can definitely see sort of like both sides on that though. But yeah, I definitely think with like Lee as well. What did you think of Lee anyway, and Lee's kind of storyline throughout here?
I think he becomes a bit of a martyr, and I don't mind that. He's an interesting character because he's so focused on his siblings and getting his sister and his mum back. He's probably one of the most two-dimensional characters, but I think if you try and make every character three-dimensional, you're going to have a hard time. I think it makes like he is not a voice of reason. He is very much the empathy, but then he's also the avenging one. You know, he wants to see stuff brought down. He's angry at the mayor. Yeah, he's an interesting character, and I'm glad he survived.
Oh yeah, because I was worried for a minute that he was going to die, and I was like, not a teenage character, not another one, please.
Well,
but I did like, yeah,
they considered it.
Yeah, but I did also like that he gained that relationship with Wilf as well, and I think his relationship with Wilf was really nicely done.
Yeah,
you know, Wilf is such a nice and calm character in the middle of all of this. He's so calm and collected, and just sort of not the voice of reason, but he is kind of the voice of reason as well. And I like that they paired him with Lee, so then Lee could sort of still see as well.
Yeah.
And
seeing it through the noise. That was fascinating. Like, as I look at ability and disability, that was interesting. I liked that. Yeah.
I did definitely really like that one as well. Like, seeing, because it didn't feel ableist in any way, which I really like, because that could have gone definitely down the ableist route.
Yeah, I think I don't know if, like, you know, not being blind, I don't know if I could say one way or the other if it was ableist to even, but I thought it was sensitive to the subject. I think that was really important. Yeah, without it sort of turning into full out ableism, which is really nice, especially considering, again, when this book was written. Yeah, it so easily could have gone down that ableist route, like so quickly, and instead Patrick Ness managed to do it sensitively without being like, oh no, he's not blind anymore, he's absolutely fine because he can see through Wilf. It was like, he's still disabled, but he's almost got not adaptive technology, but do you know what I mean? He's got like accommodations in a way. Yeah, I think accommodations is probably the best way to describe that. Yeah, because obviously, usually if you're blind, you sometimes get like a cane or like a seeing eye dog or something. And Wilf, without putting Wilf down, was kind of like a seeing eye dog. In the nicest way possible, he was a seeing eye dog. Which makes sense because he's got absolute Labrador like mentality. Oh anyway. Yeah, he's absolute golden retriever. Mm-hmm. Like, he reminds me a little bit of Tom Bombadil in the idea that everything is about his wife. Like he's a happy, jolly guy singing along, but it is very much about his wife. To be fair, my Tom Bombadil knowledge literally exclusively comes from Rings of Power, so I'll just take you at your word for that one. An occasional internet post. I know nothing else. I have not read the books. So I feel like they'd be so your vibe. That's crazy that you haven't read them. I tried The Hobbit. And The Hobbit is for children, to be fair. Yeah. But I was not the biggest fan of The Hobbit, I will say.
especially considering you skip the entire final battle. And then the Oakenshield decimation, as I call it, was basically, oh yeah, they're dead. Moving on. And I hate it when that happens. It's like, we've just followed this character for the entire book, and then you just said they're dead in a sentence and moved on.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I prefer the movie in a way, because then you see more of that devastation, despite the fact that the Oakenshields were my favourite part of those movies.
That's fair.
Mainly because Aidan Turner and Richard Armitage.
Shocker.
Yeah. Look, I grew up watching Poldark and Being Human and Spooks and things like this. What was I supposed to do?
Have you seen Rivals with him in?
I have. I did really enjoy that Rivals.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
David Tennant was in it. I will watch anything David Tennant does.
He's vile in it, though.
I know.
Like, yeah.
I love seeing him play a villain.
You do.
Like, he's Kilgrave, for God's sake. Kilgrave is terrifying as a villain. Like, he is truly vile, you know, and seeing him play, like, real-life serial killer Dennis Nielsen and things like this as well.
Yeah.
He's so good at playing a villain. But also watching Rivals was a bit of a shock.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm asexual. I've watched The Boys obsessively, and even Rivals was, I think The Boys was a nice sort of, like, preparation for Rivals, put it that way. The Boys can get quite
I've
sexual.
seen it. I've seen it. Yeah.
The bit with Rob Benedict is all I'll say. The guy who plays Chuck on Supernatural. I can never watch Supernatural again after watching The Boys. That scene was a shock, to say the least. I'm genuinely scared of what Eric Kripke is about to do to Jared and Misha in the new series. Like, genuinely worried. But I'm just going to pretend that it'll be fine.
Yeah.
You know? But yeah, so seeing Rivals was a lot. And apparently they're about to go into season 2 now. They're about to start filming.
Yeah, they've done a table read.
Yeah, and there's going to be 12 episodes instead of 8. And I was like, you're extending the episode number? I've only ever seen you shorten these things.
But that's how popular it was. Like, people loved it. Not relevant to this live show, though. So, have you got anything else on your list? Otherwise, we can discuss this off camera.
I was going to say, do you think peace is going to remain between the humans and the Spackle? Loaded question. But
I don't know if peace is ever eternal. I think there will be a semblance of control and management, but who knows? Yeah. Who could say?
Yeah, I mean, you're always going to get people who are going to be against the Spackle. There's, like, I mean, look at racism and xenophobia to this day. I think there's always going to be people who are going to be rude to the Spackle and rude about the Spackle and are going to hold on to those beliefs that they had when the Spackle were enslaved. I definitely think that's going to happen. But hopefully the rest of humanity is going to see better and learn from its mistakes. I'm saying that like humans have learned from their mistakes at all in the last 100 years. But
humans haven't learned from their mistakes from the last millennia. So
no. Humans have never learned from any mistake ever. Let's be honest here. That's why there's so many Jurassic Park.
That's already their shtick.
This is why there's so many Jurassic Park movies, because humans can never stop making the same mistakes over and over and over again and keep on building dinosaurs and going, wait a minute, why are they eating us? Yeah, but that's what makes the fun of Jurassic Park, to be fair. But yeah, it's like, I definitely think there'll be peace for a while, and it would definitely be interesting to see what happened. And hopefully we'll get this in the new trilogy or new book, whatever it happens to be. Mm-hmm. We'll get to see what happened when the main ships arrived and see what happened when they arrived and they were introduced to the Spackle and what happened when they got the noise and everything else. So that'll be very, very interesting. Yeah. And I hope we do get that in the new series, but we'll see.
But at least they'll get a warning in advance.
Yeah. I mean, if they can contact them.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they should still be able to, right? There was no reason why they couldn't contact them through the pod.
Yeah. But hopefully Viola and Todd will be able to explain it all and be like, look, these are the...
Bradley having experienced it, I think, will be quite a good voice then.
Yeah, definitely. And hopefully Ben can also be the sort of voice of reason for this as well. So we shall see what happens in the new series.
We shall.
Yeah,
Thrilling.
come out next year, and we'll hopefully do another live show then. Fingers crossed. If we don't end up all massively busy again, so we'll see on that.
What happens? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, life has been ridiculous this year, which I won't go into now, but I think that was all I really had in my list.
That's fair.
We've gone through my list quite quickly, to be honest.
Can I add one thing?
What?
Justice for Akon.
Yeah, justice for Akon.
You did warn me, and oh my god, did I cry when Akon died? Am I glad it was not Hannah Arendt? Yes.
Yeah.
But
I mean, to be fair, at least Akon knew what was going on compared to Manchi.
That made it worse. It was like Manchi all over again.
Yeah, but Manchi didn't choose that. Akon at the very least chose that ending for themselves in a way.
I'm gonna cry again. Straight up, I will cry again. Let's leave it on that, because otherwise I will cry.
Yeah, let's leave it on that. So anyway, everybody, I hope you enjoyed this live stream. If you joined us live or afterwards, and Hannah, do you have anything to quickly promote? Or
the only thing I'm working towards at the moment is an actual play in real life. So unless you're in the Oxfordshire area, it's not really of any interest to you. But I wrote a play. It's going at the Mill Art Centre in July. It is called Puck. It is a sequel to Midsummer Night's Dream, and it should be a really good time. It is on the 10th to the 12th of July, and I'm exhausted just directing it. So come and see it if you can.
And also, everybody go join our check out Waypoint Books as well, because
that too. Yeah, obviously.
Yeah, and obviously that. And for me, check out my blog, The Comic Book Sanctum, if you want to know more about Marvel Comics. I yak a lot on there, and I also have an Etsy store that sells bookish merch. If you want to have a check at that, all of the links will be in the description below. And I think that is what
I just loved it. It was just that they'll be down below. Look,
this is how I end most of my videos anyway. I'm
here for it.
Yeah, it's fun. Anyway, we'll leave that there. So I hope you enjoyed us, and see you next time for whatever other live show we eventually do. Bye.
Whichever book traumatizes us next.
Yeah, whatever book traumatizes us next.